Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
There we go.
And okay, let's move ahead to the agenda. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So I am calling this meeting of the Tier 1 Physical Regionalization Working Group to order. It is 2:10 on October 2nd, 2025, and I'm Barbara Neal. We are recording the meeting. The recording will be posted to the task force webpage. Let's start with our roll call. If you could please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Paul White.
I am here.
Okay, and Michael Wright.
I am here.
Great. So of course we have Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate as well. And Kate Delorier from Westminster is joining us. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see, on to approval of the agenda. Paul or Michael, any changes needed to the agenda?
Not for me.
Nope.
Okay. All right. We'll consider it approved then and move on to approval of the minutes. I did not update my notes. These would be the minutes from the September 18th meeting,
18th,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Moving on to approval of those minutes. Is there a motion to approve them?
I confess I have not looked at them. So
Okay. Why don't we defer approval of the minutes to the next meeting?
that was the meeting that Michael wasn't able to make, right? This is the two
That's
of us.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. We'll defer approving those until the next working group meeting. Okay, so back to you, Dom.
Okay, thank you. To confirm, we are all here to talk about physical regionalization or facilities-based and Tier 1, as MCP has referred to it as. This fits into our working group evaluation schedule, which is shown there. It shows the different working groups ongoing. Right now, we've had Tier 2 and Tier 3 complete their work, at least temporarily, as well as governance. Governance was discussed at the last task force meeting, and we'll receive further discussion at the next one. And we are working as the Tier 1 group here. And we are striving to get the first funding and cost sharing working group meeting on the books. So hopefully that will occur within the next couple of weeks. Any questions on the schedule?
Nope.
Okay, the objectives, as we have reviewed before, for this working group are to develop preliminary recommendations and priorities that support the physical regionalization plan as part of the task force recommendations. We have a few action items that were established in previous meetings. I have them all here, even the first couple that were closed. Actually, the third one was closed as well. We did receive that input from Chris, and we did accomplish the other action items. The only one we have left that I have ongoing is action item number 4, to look at the formulas that are used to distribute costs among various agencies. We are still trying to capture that. I do know that for Capital Fire, as one example, they use the grand list for determining the fees that their towns pay for their membership. That's the only date point I have right now. I don't know, Rick, did you have any further input on that, or that's something we need to look at further?
Yeah, I think we need to look further into it, but yep.
Okay. All right, thanks. A couple of slides here, a little bit of review. from the system design plan developed by MCP, there were these key findings with regard to physical regionalization, essentially the 37 communication centers that are used or have activity to dispatch Vermont public safety agencies. And we know how the 37 breaks down. There's 6 PSAPs that also dispatch. There are 25 Vermont-based dispatch centers, and then there are 6 out-of-state dispatch centers that do dispatch for some Vermont jurisdictions. And MCP has put together what they call a regionalization criteria, and that is based on metrics that they typically use to identify which of those 37 dispatch centers might be candidates for regionalization, as they refer to it. And these are the category 1 and category 2 criteria. And they utilize these to provide the recommendations that they have in their tier 1 options, which we're going to get to in just a minute. Their criteria they use is if a center has 6 or more of the category 1 attributes, or a combination of 8 or more of the category 1 and 2 attributes, then those would be candidates to be regionalized, essentially. And as further review,
Hey, Dom, could you go back to the previous slide, please?
sir.
So I just want to bring everyone's attention to this. These variables, this criteria that they make their decisions on, I don't know if you've looked at it carefully. I'm sure you haven't seen it in a while, except when we reviewed it last week for those of you who are here. This criteria is the foundation of their regional planning proposal. And so I encourage you to look at these. A lot of them make sense. This is kind of their criteria. So just for the sake of the working group's background, these are kind of decision making points that are worth understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
These are the 5 options that were presented in the system design plan by MCP. And question, can everyone read this fine, or should I go to the presentation mode? Does that make it easier?
I can see it fine. I don't know if others have other opinions.
It's a little small, but
I can see it.
I know you've had trouble with presentation modes.
Yeah, and I'm going to again.
No, I can see it. We can see
We
it.
can see it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's good.
Oh, you can? Okay, I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't.
All right. No, I can. Sometimes it does that when I have multiple monitors. Okay. Again, these are the 5 options. And we noted in previous discussion that a number of these options include PSAP recommendations as well as dispatch center regionalization recommendations. And Barb has pointed out accurately that the goal of the task force is to come up with a plan for dispatch operations and not looking at impacts to or changes to the PSAP model. So in light of that, I tried to look at these options and kind of boil them down. If we took the PSAP piece out of the options that MCP provided, this is what they would look like, essentially. And option 1 is regionalizing 12 dispatch centers. So essentially, so all of these, of course, keep the 6 PSAPs that we have today. And option 1 would identify 12 dispatch centers that would be absorbed in other dispatch centers in one way or another. And it's based on their criteria that we just reviewed, based on the assumption or the analysis that certain ones meet 8 or 9 of the criteria shown previously. Option 2 then takes the next step, ignoring the PSAP issues. Option 2 takes the next step to go to limited dispatch center model. So it essentially brings it down to an additional 4 or 5 dispatch centers are regionalized. So we're down to about 6, and I say about, I need some further clarification from MCP on that. We have not been able to get together on that, although we do have a meeting scheduled for later today, so hopefully I'll get clarification. And then option 3, if we ignore the PSAP changes, option 3 really is no different than option 2. So nothing changes there. Option 4 essentially eliminates all regional dispatch centers. I'm sorry, is there a question?
I think we're good.
Okay. Option 4 eliminates all regional dispatch centers with the exception of the 2 shown there, Mad River Valley Ambulance and the University of Vermont. And that's due to specific unique requirements according to MCP. So that would mean in that option, we have our 6 PSAPs, the 2 state and 4 regional. They would continue to dispatch, and they would pick up additional agencies for dispatch based on the other regional entities being regionalized. And option 5 is similar to option 4 in terms of dispatch, the regional dispatch, although I did include this one, even though it's primarily a PSAP change, but the county-based PSAPs that they're proposing here would also do dispatch as well. So it does kind of work into our options here, even if we try and ignore the PSAP recommendations. But option 5 was no regional dispatch, but yet have a number of county-based PSAPs that handle dispatch as well. And I believe 8 were identified in the MCP report. This is another item I would like clarification on from MCP as to how they arrived at those 8 and what suggestions they would have there. And in each of option 4 and 5, I should point out that they provide an option for a dispatch center to continue to operate if they are self-funded and agree to be subject to state policies. So that's kind of how these 5 options break down. And when we take out the considerations for PSAP, and the other new input we have for today is at the end of the last meeting, Paul, I believe it was you that kind of recommended what I would consider to be an alternative approach when you discussed a potential scenario where we would have all the regional communication centers. I think that was one suggestion that was made last time as well, that we refer to them as regional communication centers instead of dispatch centers. That we would continue with all of them, at least initially, and over time introduce the benchmarks or the requirements that all regional communication centers would need to meet in order to continue to operate, whether it be some type of accreditation or receiving funding from the state based on whatever funding model is developed. So we would essentially let them determine if they want to continue operation and incorporate the changes necessary to make improvements and to meet the state standards / requirements, or encourage them to regionalize on their own.
Right.
So this would be more of an organic model as opposed to something where the task force or some other body decides who would be regionalized and who wouldn't.
Right. Sort of a forced organic or incentivized organic.
Incentivized, right,
Right.
exactly. Right. So does this accurately capture what we discussed?
Yeah, I think so.
I also put the third bullet in there, which was offered as an option in option 4 and 5 by MCP, also to permit self-funded, again, assuming some funding model exists that will support the regional communication centers. There would be an option for those to self-fund, to operate, continue to operate, but they would also be subject to state policy and technology requirements. Although looking at this now, I'm not sure if that third bullet really adds anything, because that kind of incorporates what's in number 2, I guess,
Right.
as well. Because if they're going to meet the technology requirements, then they would meet the requirements established by the state to be accredited, and then would receive funding. So.
Right. I think it just, it gives a real life example of what we mean we're talking about this. So I think it's okay to have it in there.
Okay.
As I read this, though, I'm thinking about whoever is the governance over this is going to need some teeth, right? So there's going to need to be a mechanism where these self-funded ones, or even the ones that do go along and meeting the benchmarks, how are they proving that, right? How do we know that those things are actually happening? So I guess that's for a conversation later down the road with whatever, or for whatever governance group is put together.
So
Agreed.
I have a couple of tough questions to ask, if I could. I on the second bullet there, continue receiving accreditation and funding. So I want to just talk about funding. What funding are we talking about, and how much funding, and what's the source of that funding? Because right now, only the PSAPs are receiving funding. And so now we're saying that the regional communication centers are going to receive funding, and that's going to be kind of the carrot. And there really is that, and that kind of becomes also the stick, because if they choose to self-fund, permit self-fund it, and kind of they're all self-funded today. And I don't, they're really not self-funded, other than they're funded by the towns that they have as customers. So
Right.
the funding part is a bit vague to me. I'd like to understand where the funding is coming from and how much it is, or some benchmarks, and I mean, I like the
So would we
idea.
all?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do we have that? That's one item that obviously needs to be further developed. So if you have
Right.
suggestions, I mean, well, we want to start the funding working group soon, but I guess we're assuming that there will be some type of funding mechanism.
Right. Isn't that the ultimate goal, that all the costs associated with operating an RCC will shift from, I mean, ultimately the money comes from the local communities. It's just a matter of how does it get there? Do they contribute directly, or do they pay some kind of an assessment to the state, which then in turn funnels it out.
Right.
Right,
What do we
right.
think?
Certainly, if it were the latter, then that would be a mechanism for the state to oversee those RCCs,
Right.
the state
I mean,
through the
that-
governance body.
Right. That's really the only way to enforce any of these benchmarks or these best practices is if we somehow get them into a position where they're receiving their funding from either from the state or from some governance body, who then has the ability to withhold that money if they're not living up to what they need to do.
And I kind of believe that is I don't know if I want to say that it has to be the case, but that's certainly a potential method, because that's also a way to equalize the payments per
Right.
town,
Right.
right? That's another
That's
key.
right. That's also the only way we're going to achieve equity
Right.
in what the communities are paying, so that you
Exactly.
don't have some towns getting a free ride and other towns paying the full freight.
Right. And that's, of course, one of the key objectives of the task force.
I like that understanding of the model, kind of that redirects fundings directly that is being paid right now to the RCCs to the state. And I'm not sure what the state is. Is it the governance board, or? But we can clarify that. But what do we do in the event that there's insufficient funding? Who covers the insufficient funds? And are they free to negotiate their own contract and labor, and things are going to change? Right now they do that all internally. This model here kind of flips it in that they would receive their funding and from I'm just going to say the state, who is levying fees on the towns. And so I don't know. I mean, I it's the mechanics of that sound right, but how to we if this is what we're going to propose to the funding group, then I think we need to give them some background as to why. We have some insight into what it's costing today, based on the survey, but that information is incomplete. There was a number of entities that didn't
Right.
provide their actual cost.
This is going to be tricky, because it's not going to go anywhere without the answer to the funding question. And there just seem like so many pitfalls here.
Right. And it's going to be perceived like just one more example of the state imposing mandates without adequately funding something. Because
Right.
there's no way, I mean, no matter what we come up with for a funding source, it's never going to be adequate. There's always going to be a need for more money.
Right.
I mean, I assume it's kind of like with the 911 funding, you have a certain metric that you use to pay for each 911 position, regardless of which PSAP it's in. And if that entity, if that center wants to spend more than that, they have to come up with it on their own, right?
Right. So talking, thinking about the 911 system, I don't know if this might add to this conversation. So we provide the system itself, right? All the equipment, all the training. We create the standards, and then we have this MOU with each of the PSAPs that they'll provide the call handling service for us. I mean, could there be something on the dispatch side that's similar? Like the dispatch governance group would provide A, B, and C. They'd create the standards. And then they'd enter into similar agreements with whoever wanted to participate. And so those entities would be able to take advantage of, say, a CAD system or whatever else might come into play. You know, and even as I'm talking, I'm thinking this is not answering the question because we still don't know how we're paying for it.
Right.
Well, but I like where you're going, Barb, because if it's not hard currency, it's soft currency. It's access to CAD, to RMS, to the Rapid SOS, to training. Perhaps there's an ability for a funding for backup when people go to training, so that you could, you're getting a fee for paying them that covers perhaps a backfilling that
Right.
staffing. I mean, we come up with a model that that leaves the funding to them to run their center, but we have some other benefits that reduce their operating costs that we could
Right.
centralize. I think that we could. I think that would be more palatable right now. I think that's more palatable. Right now, they do get Valcor at no cost to them, but everybody needs a CAD. So if a CAD was, one of those items, including the capital and ongoing operating costs, that would, I think we could justify that and training and others. But
Mhm.
I think we need to think through this. But I like that soft currency better than hard currency approach.
You said it much more clearly than I, so I'm glad you got something out of that. But yeah, we would just have to define what elements of the system this governance group is going to provide.
But I would have to ask, Rick, if there's that soft currency, as you put it, uh, what other funding would the regional communication centers have to operate? What else would they use?
Well, they're still collecting money from their towns, so the towns are still paying their way. If we go after, towns, I mean, and Paul, certainly talks about this. I mean, there is inequity right now. Not
Right,
only is
right.
yeah, there's inequity from a variety of different factors. One, there's those are getting free service from the state PSAPs, and
Yeah,
then there is a difference of cost per center,
sure.
that they charge towns, and ideally, if that could be equalized, that would be, that would be a benefit. That therefore, then we would eliminate we would, kind of avoid competition over pricing, which is
Exactly.
what's going on out there right now. So how do we, what could the state contribute to those regional communication centers in the way of hard currency? I don't have an answer for that, but if we think that's also included, that's also required, now we got to put our funding thinking hats on to give some suggestions or at least some framework to the future working group on funding.
Well, how do we equalize what the towns are paying? Uh, I mean, one way would be to have them pay it to a central body, whether it be the governance body or some other organization within the state. How else could we do it? It could be some type of legislation that says each town will pay its regional communication center X based on Y and Z.
Uh,
What other options are there?
well, as Paul said, we need a crystal ball for that one.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Right.
If we do that, we're creating a need for administration. So, you got to collect the fees, you got to chase down
yes,
the fees, you got to distribute the fees. I mean, that's going to take, a financial group, payroll, and whatever. I mean, maybe we're not doing payroll, but you're collecting money and you're distributing it. So I don't.
yeah. The
Right
governance group
now,
identified a need for a fiscal agent or some type of
yeah, yep.
right
Well, you
fiscal
need more than an
support.
agent. You would need,
Right,
you'd have to have staff for that because
right.
that that that's a lot of paperwork.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I mean,
we are
it could be
definitely
done.
we're definitely creating another state bureaucracy. I mean, it's in all of that, all of those functions, all of those roles, all cost money, which are added on top of, what it costs to maintain radios and all of that.
True.
And I'm sure that each of the centers today probably have their customers or towns that pay on time, and clockwork, and then they have others they got to chase down. I mean, that's typical, just how life works. But I don't. If we're saying that that's how we want to do it, then we also need to understand that there are costs associated with that whomever took over the responsibility would, also have to absorb, because you'd have to enter in agreements with the towns, and that's a lot of towns. And so, yeah, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just wanting to be sure that we consider and have recommendations for how it could be done.
Right. It's almost feels like, at the very least, we ought to be able to introduce some equity by even requiring, I don't know if that's requiring towns that are served by the state police dispatch center currently at no cost to require some reimbursement to VSP, right? I mean, or maybe you flip it around and you require VSP to charge their customers. I don't know which probably isn't going to make anybody very happy on either side of that equation. But
no, because then you get back to the whole, what do you use? They haven't implemented any kind of a fee structure before now, because nobody's ever agreed on what it should look like. Who should pay? Who should pay for what, and how much, and how do you arrive at the cost? And
right.
Several commissioners have tried, but nobody's done it successfully. And I'll state for the record, I don't like this. I don't like the idea of creating a new state.
Oops, you dropped off, Paul.
Are you still there? Oh, okay.
Communities that you can you hear me still?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Yeah.
When you say
lost your
state entity, are you referring to the governance body or something else?
Whoever is going to assess the assessments on the towns, and employ the director and employ the staff, and basically mirroring Barb's shop. So we're creating a whole new layer of expense on top of what it costs to operate the dispatch center. And I don't like the idea of telling communities, look, you can no longer run your own dispatch center unless you do X, Y, and Z. I don't like any of it. But I don't know how we can satisfy Act 78 without doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Paul, you weren't at the last full task force meeting, right? You had to miss that one?
No, I tried to call in, but I kept dropping off and calling back in and dropping off. And so I missed most of it, and I need to still watch that.
Well,
meeting.
Dan Batesy made a observation a little similar to part of what you just said, which was in looking at the governance structure that was proposed, that he said it's essentially what the 911 board is now, which is not exactly so. There's quite a few other members on the proposed board than exist on the existing 911 board. He was pretty adamant that it was a duplication of effort to have both boards. And basically I said, let's table this discussion or whatever and let this percolate, because I wasn't going to be able to commit or speak on behalf of the board for that idea, and wasn't even sure how I felt about it myself, if it's going to be an effective thing. At any rate, Dan and Televate will be at the next 911 board meeting, and to update on where we are overall, but also on that governance piece. And that will give the 911 board members an opportunity to provide their their feedback on both, any approach. So, so my point was, Dan made a similar observation as you did about the kind of duplicate bureaucracy.
However, Barb, I did want to say I really like what Jim had to say. You create this board, it gets things up and running and going, and then over time they merge together. But that was
Yep.
I thought that was really that was insightful that the existing board already has responsibilities, and so why not form this new board and then over time merge them. But I thought that was interesting. Put another option for
Yeah,
them.
no, that's
Sure.
true. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because I'd kind of forgotten about that piece of the conversation. You're right.
Well, and we sort of said something similar to that at our last governance working group meeting.
That's true. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I didn't mean to rain all over this parade here, but I just I want to I'd like to get the meat on the bone so that we don't run into a similar situation where we present it to task force and then they're like, what no, that don't work. So we got to think through all the the needs
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
risks.
No, we need to do that. And are there alternatives? Are there other things that we want to consider? It seemed like certainly at the last meeting that the working group really wasn't inclined to to adopt any of the options presented here, for example, or even some modification of them. So this is really the first attempt that the group has had to develop an alternative.
Yeah, and keep in
But
mind too that some of our stakeholders have mentioned, why go with a model where you have fewer or no regional communication centers, and why not, follow the New Hampshire model where you have 911 call centers, but there's plenty of dispatch centers, and so that model, that's another model. Not that
yes,
we should
yes.
add that one to the list, but that was another model. And I don't know how people feel about that one, but that one is also has its pros and cons, I would say.
Yeah, we had talked about that initially, certainly. Although that does impact the PSAP side of the house, which I think was one reason we, uh, kind of curtailed discussion on that.
Well, Barb has reminded us many times that this isn't about the PSAPs, so.
Right. I mean, and there will be discussion about PSAPs. To me, that discussion happens after we figure out what we're doing with the regional communication centers, with the dispatch centers. But I'm not inclined to lead rather with reorganizing the PSAPs, because I don't
Right.
see how it helps to answer the questions that are in front of us right now.
So I'd have to ask, what are our next steps? Do we is it worth to look at the pros and cons of the 5 options MCP provided, or do we need further discussion or development of this alternate approach? Are there other subject matter experts that we should consult with?
I feel like we need to kind of follow Rick's lead here and dig down a little bit more into the details of what we mean under bullet number 2,
Okay.
right? What do we mean by accreditation? And what about this funding thing? So, or maybe we even establish the basics of what would be provided to the centers that are participating in this.
Yeah, we don't want this to be the easy button to let status quo, to leave the status quo. Again, I think, MCP's approach was, we really highly recommend that you change the status quo. You have some centers that aren't 24/7. You have others that only take in a few calls. You have others that don't have sufficient staffing. And so we do
Right.
have some challenges out there. And if we got to rock the boat, so to speak, gently. But it shouldn't be. We don't want it to be perceived as rocking the boat. We want it to be perceived that we're offering options that improve and equalize services and cost of delivering those services. So I don't know. I'm obviously we got some work to do here, but I also don't know if it would be a bad idea to look at some of the pros and cons for some of those other ideas, see if we can't grasp something that we can plug into this new model. We don't have the answers yet, but could we learn something by reviewing some of the thoughts that MCP put on paper?
Mhm.
If there's something there that makes sense to review, I don't know, but I don't know if that would hurt us to look at it.
I'm scrolling down to see what, I know I've got some of that information provided. This is out of the report, and it lists so this is a list, and I think this page as well, yeah. Strengths of the various options. 2 slides on this, and there's also a table on the challenges.
I don't know with the approach Paul came up with, sort of this establishing benchmarks and having it take, time for centers to comply with them. I don't know that is the status quo necessarily. I think it's just not ripping
No, I don't
up.
think it is, no.
Yeah, right. And I don't think that it could be used as an excuse to maintain the status quo either. If you establish a benchmark, and this is why I thought of it, for example, of you have to have 2 people working all the time, then then centers that only have 1 would either do that, or they'd find a more or a better solution by going to another dispatch center. I think it's best for the benefit would be to the public and the responders, right? When we were establishing those benchmarks. And then it would be up to the individual centers to meet them or not.
Right. Another example I was thinking of was the 24-hour coverage. If I am a police department and I want to offer dispatching Monday through Friday 8 to 5, but during the off hours I want to flip the switch and send all those calls to Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we as the task force to tell them that they can't do that? That to me would be one of the low benchmarks, low hanging fruit, as you were, to say that kind of center should close. You should either be a dispatch center or you shouldn't.
Right.
But we don't have the teeth right now to say that.
Right. Right. And I guess, continuing on with this, what's in the best interest for the public? Is it bad that they're not 24 hours as long as the calls are getting answered 24/7?
Right.
I don't know.
As long as they're
receiving
adhering to
similar
the
service.
standards. Right.
Right.
As long as their personnel are getting adequate training and they're meeting the certain standards.
Right, exactly. So, Michael, it looked like you were about to say something, and Kate, I see your hand. So, Michael, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, first of all, benchmarks is where we need to go. And secondly, we have no idea across the state. No dispatch center that I'm aware of has benchmarks, and we have no idea to measure those. We have no idea. We can't say right now that A center is meeting, 100% of all these benchmarks and B center is meeting it at 50%. We have no idea.
Right.
So we don't know the quality of dispatch across the state. I can tell you the quality of our dispatch center, right, as being an end user, and we could also call other, service chiefs and fire departments and everything, and they could, do an assessment of their dispatch center and try to give an evaluation. But we know for a fact it's all over the map. There's some dispatch centers that are very good, and there's some dispatch centers that are very poor. So I think we do need to know, we need to set as a state, we need to set those benchmarks. And there's a lot of benchmarks beyond staffing levels that we
Right.
should be,
Right,
asking
right.
for, certainly, right? Yeah, I mean, I could bring up, that's a whole nother conversation, of just stuff that blows my mind some days, that's not happening currently. So, I think that is a big starting point that we have to further dive into or assess.
Right. And as you were talking, Michael, I was thinking about a survey that is being developed to go out to every municipality in Vermont. And I wonder, Rick, if we have questions about this kind of stuff. What's your level of service you're currently receiving? Maybe that could be incorporated into that survey.
I'd be happy to add value to that survey. I mean, we bounced around lots of different questions, and I didn't want it to be too long. We didn't want it to be too
Right.
long, but we have this opportunity, and it's going to be published. I mean, we're working to get the email out tomorrow. Michael and I spoke today, but I have some, we have some time. It doesn't necessarily have to be published until even the day of or the day after the town hall. I would like to have it finalized, but it doesn't have to be. I mean,
Okay.
we have time. I could add some of those questions in.
All right. Kate, thanks for being patient. Your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add some perspective for the 24/7 or the dispatch centers that do Monday through Friday for the regional dispatch centers. It is a tremendous help to have even one person at these local agencies that answer the phone Monday through Friday, because they're able to handle like the Monday through Friday local questions that come up regarding their town and leave like the emergencies and stuff to be handled by the regional dispatch center.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So it's taking some workload during normally busy times off the emergency telecommunicators. That makes sense.
Yeah, we're able to send, late reported things that happen to the clerks at these PDs, and they are able to handle those, and so that we can focus on just handling the emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and yes, thank you for that, Kate, and I agree. But I don't think, no matter what we come up with for a model, I don't think we're talking about eliminating those stay behinds, those
Right.
clerks
Mhm.
or the people that handle the calls, like what time is the parade on the 4th of July, or can I get somebody to go unlock the gate at the ball field, or those kind of things. I think we're talking about diverting all of those away from the dispatch centers. So that's kind of a different conversation in my mind, but I mean, I agree. It's just the agencies all need that kind of a person to answer those kind of questions. But are they considered dispatchers?
Right. In
I have a question of follow up for Kate. The funding that the towns pay, do they for a center like that? Do they pay a partial to a center who then becomes their their transfer center. Right now we're talking about equity there, and if a given, if one of those part-time entities are transferring, then I'm assuming that they have to pay fees in order to get coverage after hours coverage. Is that
Not for the state police.
okay? Gotcha. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that would be a question for Jim Mack or Roger Marcoux or Tawny down at Hartford.
Sure.
I don't know what I mean, I'm sure they charge fees, but I don't know if I don't know what they base their fees on, like if they even handle any of those administrative type calls, or do they only handle, public safety calls?
Right.
Like I know for like where I live in Barrytown, Lamoille County is both our PSAP and our dispatch center, and they're very like generous, maybe is the term I should use. We try not to make it a routine, but they do take a lot of calls. If somebody calls, we forward our DPW line to the ambulance department off hours because somebody will always answer it. And of course, then the ambulance, when they're not in the building, forward their calls to the dispatch center. So as a result, Lamoille County ends up getting a lot of our DPW calls, which we don't pay for, but they don't just tell the caller, sorry, I can't help you. They take a message, they relay it to the appropriate person. And I don't know that we pay extra for that, but we should.
Another question?
Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
So here at Springfield, we're relatively self-sufficient. We have our own we dispatch for our own fire department and our own police department. We're completely self-funded. We're not a PSAP, which means we don't have a 911 center that we don't take 911 calls. What does this mean for towns like us? I believe Bennington is similar, Brattleboro is similar, Rutland City is similar, where we dispatch for ourselves. And for somebody I'm all for certifications and accreditation because I think that, like police officers, everybody should have a baseline training to do the job. But for the state to come in and say, well, now you have to meet these arbitrary benchmarks of equipment, staffing, even though the staffing model we have now works for us. For you to say I need 2 people in there at all times, that's overkill for what we have and what we need. So how do we judge that as far as for towns like Springfield?
Well, I think that's like the bottom line question, right? How does it impact you?
Right. Well, I think part of it is, if you're only taking care of yourself, I think that this new entity, whatever we create, will have less control over a place like Springfield. But once that, if it's Springfield or Bennington or wherever, once they make the decision to start offering their services to their neighboring communities.
But if that's not something we're interested in, and we want to be self-containing and self-sufficient, are we going to be allowed to do so?
Right.
Right. I think you should be able to. I think if you're only looking to take, this is just my opinion, but if you're only looking to take care of your own community, then I think there needs to be some minimum standards for public safety purposes. But if you're not purporting yourself to be a regional dispatch center or a regional communication center, you're not trying to offer your services to your neighboring communities, then you should be allowed to do what you do. You're funding yourself, you're just taking care of your own business.
Right. And I think we'll have similar comments, when you think like, Burlington, South Burlington, right? They do this for their own town and nobody else. I think I'm speaking correctly on both those entities. So, right. But to Dan's question, we have to be able to give folks those answers, right? Or whatever this governance group is that's coming up, would have to be able to address that.
I think what Dan brings up is a good point, and it also comes back to funding there because, the cost of certification, um, there is a cost to it. There is a training, there is ongoing, there's initial training, there's ongoing refresher training, there's a variety of different elements that we can quantify and that are quantified. But I think one of the goals in order to get Springfield and all centers up to the common standards, as Michael pointed out, benchmarks. There should be funding for that. That could be part of the funding. We want you to be here. We want to achieve. We want, regardless of how we, inorganically, organically achieve a regionalization. These are, we recommending that there has to be a common set of benchmarks, certification, and that should be part of funding as well. And I think Dom was, he's putting it there, training opportunities, common policies, procedures, but that costs money. And so I think that should be part of what we recommend be funded because and that's just not, you're attending the class, but you might need to backfill that person or individual for a given period of time. So I think as we go to this, look for additional funding, it should cover that. That should be an incentive. We're going, the state, the governance board over it is going to cover that. Now, where those funds come from, there's got to be an ongoing allocation out of the annual state budget of some sort. I mean, I don't think the state expected us to figure this all out without having some money or needing some money. Or if they did, I don't know what they were thinking. But
Right.
I think those are very important elements. It says here's what we need to do, and here's what here's how we're going to do it, and here's funding we're going to need initially and ongoing. Just a
I
thought.
have one question for Dan. One of the things that's brought up when there's only one person working in a center is what happens if you get some major event and you're hammered with calls. How do you handle that?
Well, here in Springfield, we have a panic button on our phone
Okay.
that rings all of the other dispatchers that are not on duty to see if anybody is available or could be available to come in and help. That also will include officers. A lot of times one of us or an administrator will go down and help answer the phones just to take that little bit off of the dispatcher that's dispatching the emergency.
Mm-hmm.
As far as to speak to the training and standard, I would recommend something. I know the state police has a basic dispatch course that they do for all their new hires. I think Kate could probably speak more to it. It's like a little mini dispatch academy that they do for their people. I think something along those lines that we can model after that all dispatchers across the state go to, much like officers, and like your 911 call takers have a basic class that they have to go to before they can answer or pick up that 911 phone.
Right.
That shouldn't be any different for dispatch.
Right. Like the state runs a police academy, they run a fire academy, they run a corrections academy.
But they don't run a dispatch academy.
Right.
Right.
And another thing that a little off topic is the state ever going to recognize dispatch as first responders?
That conversation has come up in I'm not sure which working group. Is it governance? No.
3. No, it's in 3. It's in the operational group.
Operational. Okay. I knew we
Yeah.
talked about it somewhere.
Yeah, you remember that group.
Yes,
So
I was. Yeah, so that's on the table for discussion too, Dan.
Okay, like I said, I think it should happen. There's other states that have gone through, and there's definitely model policies and legislation out there that we can mirror. It just opens them up to, or our dispatch up to more services for mental health and other training as well. But I don't need to tell you.
Yep. Yes, indeed. No, thank you for your input. All right. Back to you, Dom. I see you were furiously taking notes.
Well, trying to take some notes. I'm trying to think our next steps to try and flush this out a little bit more thoroughly. Try and identify some of the, as Rick said, put the meat on the bones to this type of potential option. What would the what benchmarks would we potentially recommend? What would the benefits be for the regional communication centers to meet those benefits? They'd get would there be resources provided, funding? What are some of the other things that we would need to recommend?
Well, and maybe, to go along with what Dan brought up,
Yes.
MCP's recommendations has carve outs for University of Vermont and from Mad River Valley Ambulance.
Right.
Perhaps there should also be carve outs for any existing agency. I won't call them an RCC, an agency that is only dispatching for themselves and not intending to be an RCC. They're not offering their services for a fee to any of their neighbors. They only want to take care of themselves. Perhaps there should be a carve out for agencies like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to capture that concept here.
Yeah, under training opportunities, I do a sub bullet, state funded dispatch training academy.
Yeah, so if we're talking about a dispatch academy, the standards for the police academy are overseen by the Criminal Justice Council. The standards for the fire academy are overseen by, I assume, the Division of Fire Safety. Who I assume that this governance body that the other working group is proposing would create and oversee the standards for a dispatch academy.
That would be my recommendation. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
The governance body?
Yeah.
Right. The ECAC or whatever we're labeling that 15-member panel.
Right. Under resources to be provided, the radio network piece of this keeps going through my head. And the state has its radio network. So maybe what I'm thinking is a resource to be provided is access to that or facilitation of making those connections. I don't know, but I was just thinking LMR. Shouldn't there be some component of LMR that this governance group manages?
So the governance group has a committee that's training and LMR, broadband, cybersecurity operations. So yeah,
Right.
we fully agree with you. We're still working on an affordable network strategy because while we agreed that statewide radio network regionalized is required. What we received from MCP was unaffordable, was dead on arrival, in our opinion. So we've been working on an option based on requests from that working group. That would be tier 2 technology. So we are working on that.
Okay. let's see. So we're getting towards the end of our time. Do we need to figure out next steps, Dom?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I've been trying to think about is flushing this out a little more. Is that our next step? Are
Um,
there other examples of organizations or governance bodies to review to get ideas on how to put this together? Other subject matter experts?
hmm.
This is a difficult one to reference what others have done, but
Yeah.
there are a few models out there where um, states and or local jurisdictions have consolidated. But this is a very difficult one for anyone to touch. I mean, we worked in one county where there was 80. There was 60 to 80 PSAPs, and we're like, we don't need that many, but no one wants to. They don't want to touch that. It's politically charged, and it's a very difficult one. So what we're reviewing and contemplating is not easy, as we all know. So, what are our next steps? I think flushing this out makes a lot of sense. So that we continue to see what we can do to advance the cause.
Right.
So I can send this, at least the content of this slide out uh, to the three of you to review further and
Yeah,
maybe provide some additional input.
Sure.
that makes sense.
Sounds good. Happy to do that.
So, can I just follow up on a comment you made earlier, Barb? Is there any other ideas regarding what questions I could put into this survey that's going to go to all the towns? That would be helpful. If we got any of those ideas.
Yeah. So it was when Michael was speaking, I think, and giving the examples of the disparities in service, right, across the state. I was thinking there should be questions related to that on the survey, but what specifically they should be, I have to think about.
I'll caucus with Dom and Elizabeth. So we're going to create some handout, and there'll be a QR code that somebody can go to directly. The email is going to go out, but any one-on-ones we can get, we can still get a code in there and still modify the survey. That'll work. So we could publish, we could still make enhancements to the survey up until I'd say the 8th, the day it gets released to the town hall. I was hoping that the email could go out by the 7th, inviting people to it so that during that session, it could be mentioned. Have you received, please be sure to check your inbox, and there's what we're doing, and here's why. That's what Mike and I talked about this morning. So I think we can add some questions right up until I'd say the last would be the 7th. So I can create a few more questions based on this. We did have one or two in there about quality of service, but based on what Michael said, I come up with a couple others.
Okay. Michael, if you have specific questions that you think would be good, maybe get them over to Rick and Dom, and
Yeah, please.
that would be helpful.
Sure.
Or
Yeah, I'll brainstorm on
examples.
that.
Yeah, if you have examples of what you would consider to be poor service or services that should be provided and currently aren't.
Yep.
Great. Great. All right, so we figured out our next steps, right?
Right?
Okay, everybody's favorite, scheduling the
That's a
next
yes.
meeting. Now, somebody said next week is a mess, Dom, right?
Well, I'm out next week, but I wouldn't expect to have time to join in. But that if next week's works for the working group members, I would say go ahead.
We just have to be aware that we need 3 days to post, so we couldn't do anything before Tuesday at a minimum
Right.
if we decide today. So Wednesday we have task force meeting. So we just need to, whatever date we come up with, we got to respect that public notice.
Right. I'm looking at a week from today would be Thursday, the 9th. I mean, would the same time or 1 o'clock actually would be better for me, but what about 1 o'clock next Thursday?
Okay with me.
All right.
As long as I remember. As long as I remember.
I think it's good. I'm just double checking. Yeah, Thursday is good. I'm just running into some conflicts with the Wednesday regular meetings because I'm back on the shift filling some open time. So that's hit or miss, but Thursdays are way more open.
Okay. So if that works for, I guess it would be Rick and Elizabeth,
Right.
Thursday at 1. We did it. And I know Elizabeth will send out the meeting notice and we'll be good. Now Dan and Kate, is Kate still on the call?
No.
No, it looks
No.
like she dropped off. Dan, this is the time for public comment. You had a few along the way, but is there anything else you'd like to add today?
No, I just, like I said before, Mr. Wolf said it. I think the best is there should be a carve out for entities that are self-sufficient and only dispatch for themselves.
Okay. That was good input. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so that brings us to adjourning. Is there anything else, Paul, Michael, Rick, Dom?
Not for me.
Nothing on my end.
Nothing.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor of adjourning for today, raise your hand or indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And my hand's up. And Michael, I assume since you
Yep, said
made
aye.
the motion, you're good with that. Okay, so we are good to go for today. Thank you very much, everybody. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
All
one.
right.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Don't forget those questions, Michael.